From Milwaukee, where I have just realized that there is no longer really an all-night diner available in this area. Not happy about that one, folks. Kurt Berglund here with you on another Pine Tar Great Team Set briefing. Today, the 1975 Cincinnati Reds, winner of 108 games during the 1975 regular season, winner of the National League Championship Series against the Pittsburgh Pirates, which wasn't a bad team, but they swept them, and winner of the 1975 World Series over the Boston Red Sox, 4-3, although Carlton Fisk said, I believe in his Hall of Fame speech, that the Red Sox won that World Series 3-4. I have some thoughts about the Reds. I want to give you the basic information that I do during all these briefings and then throw some things out there. We know that the Reds, the 1975 Reds, were the number one choice in the poll that I conducted back in January to determine the teams that would be in this set. It was one of the two big misjudgments that I made about the set, because I was of the opinion that it would be the 76 Reds that were going to be the team that was selected from that franchise for this set. But how wrong I was, because the 1975 Reds won wire to wire. We said, as you know, that the top 5 teams in the poll would be guaranteed to be created in the set. The 75 Reds led from wire to wire as the first place team to be created in this set. I was surprised by that. The 76 Reds get a lot of ink as being one of the great teams in history, but you guys didn't want them. And the 75 Reds, of course, no slouch either. 108 wins will do that. But still very interesting to me. And I would not have guessed, and I did not guess before that happened, that the 75 Reds would be the overwhelming favorite. Here are the lineups that were used very often by Sparky Anderson against the two types of pitching. Against lefties, Rose at third, and of course Rose didn't become a third baseman until the season had already started. You're not having a stroke, my light's just blinking. Morgan at second, Bench at behind the plate batting third, Tony Perez batting fourth at first base, George Foster batting fifth in left field, Merv Rettenmund, not a strict platoon partner with Ken Griffey, but often used in right field against left-handed pitching, Concepcion at short, and Geronimo in center against lefties batting eighth. Against righties, Rose at third, leading off, Morgan at second, batting second, Bench catching, hitting third, Perez batting fourth. At first base, Foster batting fifth at left field, Ken Griffey batting sixth in right field, Cesar Geronimo batting seventh in center field, and Dave Concepcion batting eighth at short. Sometimes Concepcion would bat seventh and Geronimo would bat eighth, even against a right-hander. So, I have finished carding the 75 Reds. It is an excellent team, as I remembered, and has certainly been borne out in other game engines. And then in the great team set that I am working on for Pine Tar Baseball, this is definitely a great team. There are 16 teams. This one certainly deserves to be there, and I would say right off the top of my head that if you were doing a season with those 16 teams, this would be one of the teams that I would pick for the top maybe 4. One of the top 4 places in terms of record. Now, having said that, I have a few things to get off my chest about the 75 Reds. First of all, you'll notice when you get the cards that the starting pitching is okay. It's okay. When you compare it on the curve, I guess, if you grade on the curve, and you compare it to other teams in the set, you will find their rotation to be good. Not great, but good. And if you play injuries, that means Gullett may not be around for the entire season because he wasn't in 1975 and had really an injury-plagued career. Threw hard, was excellent when he was healthy, but wasn't healthy all the time, and you could really only count on him on the average for about 2/3 of a season, if. Billingham did not have his best year in 1975, and unbelievably to me, whined about not starting another game in the 75 World Series. He started one game, but wanted to be used more. Wow, Jack, come on now. Gary Nolan did have a full season of work and also had arm trouble throughout his career. By the time 1975 rolled around, Gary Nolan was very much a finesse pitcher, but did make over 30 starts and started Game 6, the famous Carlton Fisk game. But now here's where I want to get into a few things for you to think about the 1975 Reds. First of all, I encourage you to watch Game 6 in its entirety on YouTube. First of all, an amazing baseball game, but more than that, a lot of interesting managing going on, both by Darryl Johnson of the Red Sox and especially by Sparky Anderson of the Reds. So the Reds finish their 3 games in the middle of that 7-game series. They finished the 3 games at home at Riverfront Stadium, and they head back to Boston with a 3-2 series lead. They need to win 1 game in Boston, either Game 6 or Game 7, to win the series. Sparky Anderson decides that his pitchers for Game 6 and Game 7 will be Gary Nolan in Game 6 and Don Gullett in Game 7. So he has so much confidence in Gullett in Game 7, potentially, that he decides to use an all-hands-on-deck bullpen approach to Game 6, meaning that the hook for Gary Nolan was going to be short if necessary, and he was going to use everybody and their brother, except apparently for Clay Kirby, whose arm must have been killing him because he didn't find his way into Game 6, and every other available pitcher in that on the team at that time was used in Game 6 by Sparky Anderson. That means that in Game 6, Sparky Anderson blew through his whole bullpen and some of his starters, including Jack Billingham, in relief in Game 6. Knowing that he had Gullett in Game 7. Don Gullett in Game 7. Now, that means that he was putting all of his eggs in the Don Gullett basket. Don Gullett, who lost the opening game of the World Series at Fenway Park and didn't look good. Don Gullett with a history of arm trouble. And Don Gullett, a left-handed pitcher, a good one, but a left-handed pitcher, being asked to win another game in Fenway for all the marbles, and with a less than rested bullpen to back him up. That decision by Sparky Anderson, I don't think gets enough play. I don't know. I mean, obviously it worked out. The Reds won Game 7 4-3, a very tight game. Gullett did pitch well, so Sparky got away with it. But suppose he hadn't. Now we're talking about Sparky Anderson, who lost the 1970 World Series. We're talking about Sparky Anderson, who lost the 1972 World Series in 7 games. We're talking about Sparky Anderson, who lost the 1973 NLCS to the Mets, a prohibitive underdog at that time. The Reds were heavily favored. And so Sparky comes to the World Series in 75, maybe wondering if he's going to win one, and sets up a very interesting and very second-guessable Game 6 and Game 7 pitching setup for his team. If it hadn't worked, if the Reds hadn't won in 75, Sparky would have been the one that would have been held accountable, I think, by Reds ownership. It would have made sense. All right. Last word, some positives about the 75 Reds. One, this lineup, amazing, and they're going to score a lot of runs for you in Pine Tar baseball. No question about it. There's going to be base runners all over the place. You're going to have an opportunity for stolen bases from people like Morgan, Griffey, Concepcion, and Geronimo. You're going to get your share of home runs from people like Morgan, Bench, Perez, and Foster. They're going to be fast, and they're going to be able to run first to third and second to home almost at will. A very, very talented offensive ball club. Second major strength is their bullpen. 3 folks. Well, I guess 4, really. 4-man deep bullpen. Will McEnany, Raleigh Eastwick being the short men, the closers. Lefty-righty. Clay Carroll and Pedro Borbon being the middlemen. And I guess that would make Pat Darcy and Clay Kirby. Pat Darcy and Clay Kirby the long men. Darcy, of course, gave up the famous 12th inning home run to Carlton Fisk. And what's interesting about that is that Bench looks at the looks at the dugout as Darcy is warming up for the 12th inning. Bench looks at the dugout and looks at Sparky Anderson and shakes his head to say, Darcy's got nothing. He's got nothing left. Clay Kirby's still in the bullpen, not warming up, which tells me that the Reds were definitely in that series shorthanded as far as pitching was concerned, because if Clay Kirby couldn't pitch then, he couldn't pitch at all. The weakness of this team, if it's not the starting pitching, and I think it's probably not, is the bench. Dan Driessen could hit. He could hit like a crazy man, and he could play outfield and first base. He had spent time at third base earlier in his career, but was moved from that spot because of his defense. So they put Pete Rose there. Speaking of curious managerial decisions. But other than Driessen, and I guess maybe Rettenmund, there's not much on the Cincinnati bench. So if you are playing with injuries, again, the depth really isn't there. But if you are not, or if you don't happen to get injury roles that get to the guys that are vulnerable, this team's going to score a lot of runs, this team's going to win a lot of games, and you're going to have a lot of fun with the Pine Tar Great Team set. That does it for today's Cincinnati Reds briefing. Hope it's been interesting for you. I hope you have a great day. My name's Kurt Berglund. Please click like and subscribe to my channel. And so long, everybody.